My name is Chris Niles and I'm the founder of the London Horror Society.
My name's Simon Ball. I'm the editor of the Horror Hothouse website. I'm also a contributing writer to Diabolique and the Spooky Isles, and my profession is a freelance writer.
My name's Anna Dixon. I work as a producer at Myco Entertainment Limited, producing horror feature films, short films and music video under our separate sister label Video Ninja.
Well, I'm Tony Sands. The reason I'm in film, I've written a few scripts. I do a chat show that's online. You can check that out on YouTube, wonderful. It's very good, called Hanging With, and now I meet independent filmmakers on that.
Bizarrely, on my honeymoon, I realised, as you do when you get married, you have a sort of a crushing realisation of what life is about to be, and my wife, she hates horror films. So as you do, I started looking for just any sort of horror film club or anything like that where I could, and my friends don't like them either, so I was pretty much alone. So I was trying to look for places where I could watch with other people, and I couldn't find any. So I just was bored and thought, you know what, I'll start my own club. And it kind of evolved from there to, rather than just sort of watching stuff or talking about people about the films, we kind of took it to another level in terms of actually we want to help support, you know, independent filmmakers and people that are just starting out in that sort of position and actually give them a leg to stand on.
Chris actually emailed me with an inquiry about a contact. He'd seen something I'd done involving this one particular person, and we just went from there.
We met Chris at London Horror Society at various kind of horror events, so his name came up a few times, and he was very kind enough to show one of our short films at a London Horror Society event. And since then we've just kept in touch. They're extremely supportive of homegrown independent horror, and that's about it really.
I started a chat show called Hanging With, which was to meet independent filmmakers within the horror scene. And I'd seen the London Horror Society online, so I emailed Chris asking him if he had anybody he wanted to put forward, Chris Niles, who runs the London Horror Society. And he ended up coming on the show as he'd produced the film with the director and writer of that film. And he recommended a few other people. So Chris and I have been friends ever since.
So it was called Early Bird. It was like I said, a very dark comedy based around flat sharing.
I am in the process of writing a screenplay for a kind of body horror, South American body horror, involving a certain kind of aquatic beast.
The horror film, Echoes of the Past, is a horror. I just wrote that, and I actually acted in that as well. I tried to get out of acting, but hey. I started out as an actor. When I was a kid, I was an actor. And I was actually in a show called Moondial, which was way back. I won't say what year it was because it's embarrassing, but it was a long time ago. And I was in that when I was a kid, and that caused a bit of controversy because it was quite scary. And then the writing, about 7-8 years ago, I was asked if I'd have a go at writing a horror script.
I grew up in the early 90s, was when I was a sort of a teenager and sort of figuring out film and figuring out what I liked, and this was at the tail end of the whole sort of video nasties era. So horror films still had a sort of an aura about them. You know, these were banned, these were things that, you know, people shouldn't be seeing, and it lent a sort of a real mystique and sort of a cult status to them. And I remember when I watched my first one, you know, typical teenage boy was, you know, excited to see it, but at the same time was terrified that, you know, what the hell am I about to watch? Am I going to be scarred for life?
I was born in 1958, so I grew up in the 1960s. My first introduction to horror would have been through Doctor Who, with initially William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton. From Doctor Who, I think I moved on into things like, I can distinctly remember seeing The Innocents on television, which was made in 1961, I think. It scared the pants off me. And it sort of went from there, from those sort of Innocence and the M.R. James Ghost adaptations. I got into the Hammer films. First Hammer film I saw at the cinema would have been either Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell or The Satanic Rites of Dracula, back in, I think, 1974 or 75, along with films like Vault of Horror, Beast Must Die, From Beyond the Grave, and other sort of movies of that ilk. And it just went from there.
From horror authors like Stephen King and the Goosebumps books, younger than that, because reading was always my main thing. I really got into the films because you can create your own take on other people's nightmares. Horror fascinates me because you can mix it with any other genre of film and still create an amazing horror film. It can be a drama horror, it can be a supernatural horror. You can mix it with any other genre and still create something artistic and terrifying and beautiful and heart-wrenching at the same time.
The first horror film I can properly remember is The Omen, the original Omen with Gregory Peck and Patrick Troughton and David Warner. And I think the great thing with The Omen was that I believed it. I think I could believe that could be real. You know, I'm looking at it and I think this could be so real. It's so scary. You know, like it dragged me in, and I even loved the sequels. And not many people love the sequels, but I even loved the sequels.
People like being scared, you know, it's like going on a roller coaster or something like that, and I think that rush that you don't really get in sort of other films. Yes, you know, you obviously get moved and you get sort of sentimental with various other pieces, but I think in horror, that ability to be able to watch something, be terrified, but switch off at the end knowing it's not actually real is quite hard to replicate in other genres.
I think there are a number of reasons people watch horror films. Some people watch horror films because they like gore. Not so much in my case. I like the sort of creeping suspense and the suspension of disbelief that you get in a good, well-made horror movie. I think it's people do like to be scared. So being scared is very close. Being scared is very close to laughter as well.
Because it gives them a release from sort of the normal everyday horror that we have to experience. It's a more sort of primal thing to want to be scared, and the feeling after you're scared of relief and euphoria.
I think we like to be scared. I think people like to be scared, don't they? It's kind of fun. It's like the same reason you go on a roller coaster. It's the thrill, it's the rush of adrenaline. It's a fascinating genre because it allows writers to explore so many different aspects of life. So it can talk about politics and it can talk about religion, but all hidden within a dark horror story. And they can get away with an awful lot doing that.
There's a scene, it's probably the most famous scene in Suspiria, where it's the death of the girl whose face gets pushed through a window. There's something in that and the build up from that, because it sounds awful, and this is why it's so difficult to explain horror to people that don't like it, because it is merciless. I mean, it's horrendous, but obviously as it's only a film, I'm able to sort of take an objective view of it, and I like to find the humour in horror. It's a protection thing for me, I think.
I do love the Hammer Gothics, which I think is to do with the time that I grew up in. I mean, I also enjoy a lot of 60s and 70s horror films. Aside from that, there's also 1950s science fiction, 1950s and 60s science fiction. Love monster movies.
My favourite horror scene is probably quite cliche, but the final scene of Sleepaway Camp. I won't ruin it for anyone who might be listening, but it's a very shocking scene, and the twist just captures like nothing else I've seen. It's probably my favourite slasher film. Twist at the end is just amazing, and the freeze frame on the face of the character in question it's just mind-blowing.
My favourite scene, I think, has got to be David Warner being decapitated by the glass pane in The Omen.
Tapping into people's sense of safety and security is the key, and if you're able to create something that people can relate to, you're instantly going to create something scary, I think, because people will understand it and they would have been through sort of similar experiences, I think.
So you've got to have a good story. You need someone who knows how to construct a film from the story to keep the level of suspense growing and building until you get to your final big reveal.
Good music, good suspense, good effects, the passion of the people behind it who create it.
Make your audience believe. Make them believe. Make them believe in your reality. So even, and again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. You can either make them believe that it's true, or have them, or be so good that they get lost in the reality. I think it's a mix. I think you can either make your audience believe, or make it believable with realistic characters and a realistic setting and an almost realistic story, or you can just go over the top and drag your audience in. So I think it's make it entertaining.
There's a wonderful outfit called the London Horror Festival, who every October put on a number of sort of different horror performances in a tiny little theatre above a pub in Angel, and it's wonderful. I mean, I was quite sceptical, I think, at first when I first found out about it, but as soon as I saw my first play/performance, I was hooked. I mean, it's such an obvious medium, I think, theatre for horror, because it's very immersive, it's very in front of you, and you're normally sat in a very dark room while things are played out. And it surprises me that it's not been made more of. I mean, there's been very famous horror plays like The Woman in Black or Ghost Stories. The Andy Nyman series was incredibly successful. If it encaptures you and you get really bought into it, you don't have the safety net of being able to look away from your TV screen and you're done. You're actually in a room where it's all kicking off, and despite the ability that you could run from the door, you're obviously not going to. And yeah, it certainly adds to that.
I like a lot of metal bands. I also like a lot of punk bands. I mean, sort of like growing up in the 1970s, how could you avoid that? I mean, I've tried to read as much classic horror as possible. I do like, from contemporary writers, Poppy Z. Bright, Stephen King, Clive Barker, Neil Gaiman.
I really like horror authors, horror burlesque, new TV shows like The Walking Dead, and even Game of Thrones has some very dramatic horror elements. We've made horror-themed music videos.
I watch Supernatural. I quite like Supernatural. They have some good episodes on that. The Exorcist TV series was excellent. That was really good. Stranger Things, which I'm sure loads of people have said, Stranger Things was superb. That was really, and that, talking about people who are influenced by their love of films when they grew up, you can see that in Stranger Things.
Virtual reality, I think, is going to play a massive part in sort of bridging the third wall or fourth wall. I can never remember which one that is, but actually bringing it into your living room, I guess, is the very cliched way of saying it. It's going to be big, and I think it's sort of similar to how horror video games have been developing, things like that. The market for that now is huge, and there's a reason for that, because you're able, as soon as you can become more immersed, I mean, from a film perspective and also from a theatre perspective, I guess, is that you're only going to see what the director wants you to see. So it's all his story and it's all his imagery that you see. But from a games perspective or a theatre perspective or a VR perspective, it's more immersive, so it's more up to you. And I think that's what's going to change horror for a lot of people.
It's going to come down to storytelling, and I think so long as there are people out there who can turn in something interesting, I think the genre is in a healthy state, and it certainly looks that way at the moment.
Do something no one's ever done before, or to take the modern horror cliches and turn them on their head, which is what we try to do. So with our first film, instead of a group of teenagers being tracked by a killer in a house, it was one teenager tracking a bunch of killers in a house.
I think it's moving in the right direction at the moment. I think it's going to be a mix. It's going to be good for both because we'll be getting the commercial, we'll be getting, as long as there's money coming in, as long as the movies are making money at the box office and making money, as long as series like Stranger Things or are being really, really successful and popular, then I think there's always potential there for a new generation of filmmakers to come through.